and welcome. I'm Yvonne Schwemmer, host for Your Pro Voice. As a voice talent, a Toastmaster, and a workshop and seminar leader, I've spent a lot of hours studying and practicing the art of presentation. In these segments, we bring you discussion and food for thought to help you fine-tune your presentation arsenal. After all, this is a lifelong process of improvement, and guess what? There's no graduation. So whether you're a professional speaker or somebody who just trembles at the thought of any form of public speaking, or you'd just like to improve your personal communication skills at home, welcome. Our guests today have some very specialized communication skills. They represent over 100 years of on-air broadcasting.
Wait a minute.
Doesn't that make me feel really old? And we get to benefit from the wisdom that they've accumulated over the years. So our viewers in Fresno are going to recognize these special celebrities, but let's introduce them for the benefit of any distant audience members. With more than 28 years at KC24, Faith Sidlow left her life as an anchor with that station in July 2013 and is now an instructor in Fresno State's Mass Communication and Journalism Department. And welcome, Faith.
Thank you.
Mike Scott departed his anchor spot at CBS 47 just shy of his 30-year anniversary in the summer of 2013, where he also provided movie reviews and a lot of entertainment. If you see pictures of Mike, he's always smiling and laughing. And Mike's now a key host on Fresno's premier internet TV station, Central Valley Talk. And the most recent venture on a different path from where he's been after over 50 years in broadcasting. Last year, Bud Elliott left behind 23 annuals of anchoring at KC24. So Mike, your favorite dog?
Well,
No.
what do you think? My little Robbie.
Just general and breed. If Robbie's a champ, but if he wasn't here at the moment, what would your be?
Before Robbie, I had a Dalmatian named Sam, who was a local star. He was part of our morning show on Channel 47 for a lot of years. And I love Dalmatians, but I'll tell you what, now I have a Boston Terrier. That's my new favorite breed. Those are incredibly intelligent, smart dogs. And I love my little Robbie. But I love I love animals. Mm-hmm. Everybody here, I think, loves animals. Mm-hmm. But Valley Animal Center is one of my favorite places. That's where I got Robbie, and I think they do a great job. All the local animal organizations do a great job. But
excellent.
Why were you curious about what animal?
Because I've seen pictures of you with greyhounds and Dalmatians, and I got to meet Robbie a couple of weeks ago. I never knew a dog had narcolepsy before, but I fell in love with that little guy, so he was great.
He can fall asleep standing up, yes.
And your favorite movie, to add to the trivia here?
My favorite movie would probably be 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Good.
When I was a little kid in Cinerama, I went to see that probably 100 times. And at the time, Stanley Kubrick, the director, it was just an amazing experience that I've never forgotten. And so many of today's movies have taken pieces of that movie.
Yes. Brilliant. Good. Now, Faith, your greatest post-broadcasting adventure, you ventured into being a triathlete, right?
I did do that. Yeah, I was thinking, what did I do after I left the news business? Yes, I did do a triathlon. It's called a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was on my bucket list.
It's a mini triathlon?
Yeah, it's a mini triathlon. It's basically a half-mile swim, and I have to remember all of this now. I don't know if I can. And a 25-mile bike ride and a 2-mile run, 3-mile run, yeah. And I'm not a swimmer, so that was the hardest part, right?
I guess.
But loved the bike ride, so that was what I lived for, doing the whole triathlon. And I did it with some friends who I ride bikes with, and we really, were amazed at ourselves for being able to complete it.
Well, how did you handle the swimming part if you don't swim?
I did a little
She had a
bit
float.
I panicked in the beginning.
Really?
There was a little bit of panic. You're in this lake, and I didn't realize that when you do this mass start with all of these other women, they're grabbing at your legs and they're pushing you down. It's almost like water polo, and that kind of freaked me out. But after I got to the back of the pack, then I was okay and I was able to finish the swim. But not a time to be proud of, but I was proud that I finished.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good for you. Mm-hmm. And then, Bud, you've taken on a new hobby with your time these days. I would call you a woodworker extraordinaire, but you seem to...
No, I'm really just a novice.
Yeah.
I took up wood turning, which is carving wood that is spinning between 2 points at a fairly high speed. And the reason for that is so that you can carve bowls and candlesticks and rolling pins and any number of other things. I was just sort of attracted to it. I've always kind of been interested and always been sort of an accidental woodworker, but I had never taken the time to learn to actually turn wood. And I've really gotten into it, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm also finding out about all the different kinds of woods and their different attributes and peculiarities and how they work and how they finish and how they look when you've made a bowl or something out of them.
And as the beneficiary of some of his woodwork, I can tell you he is a woodworker extraordinary.
I think you got some pistachio, didn't
Yes,
you?
I did. Oh my goodness, beautiful wood.
Well, I know the two of you at least have outside times here that we need to get you moving here. So just talk to me about the changes that have happened in the broadcasting industry. So let's sort of start with what drove you there in the first place. How did you get involved in broadcasting?
Faith.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm going to.
Yeah.
Well, I went to college and got a degree in journalism, and I started doing that because I really enjoyed writing, and was a volunteer at the public radio station in San Diego. And because of that, one job led to the next. I became a board operator there, and then I became a reporter, fill-in anchor, and that evolved into a job with the CBS radio station in Los Angeles, and from there I worked in London for CBS News as a research intern, and came back, and I had the job at Channel 24 waiting for me when I got back, because I had met the news director at the time who we struck up a great friendship and hired me right out of college.
Oh
so
my
that's
gosh.
how I got into this.
So that makes you the youngest of the lot, I think, right?
Well, no, actually, Bud started in the business. You were 12 or 13?
Yes,
And
I am
think
the youngest of the
Mike
lot.
was,
I am by far the youngest.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you manage to accrue 50 years of experience?
I know, and I'm
When
only
you start at 12,
and I'm only 39 now, so go figure.
I like that,
I actually started in high school. I was a junior in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I got a part-time job at a rock and roll radio station, and so I was a disc jockey, and I was a distributive education student, which means it was a club, but it was also some of the courses we took in high school, and as such, you got to get out of school at noon every day if you had a job. So my job was radio, and so I got to go do the afternoon show at KLOS AM in Albuquerque. Those call letters eventually went to a big radio station in Los Angeles and became very famous, but the little station I worked for at the time, back in 1965, was just a daytime AM radio station. But that's how I started.
Obviously drew you in because you lasted quite some time.
Well, I did. I sort of got hooked, and I stuck with it all through college. I went to Colorado State. I was the general manager of the college station there for 3 years and the news director for 1. And then right out of college, I had several jobs in radio stations in Denver, and then moved into TV as well in Denver in the 70s.
Good. And how about you, Mike? What was the catch for you?
Well, I started in radio too. And did you used to play in your bedroom as a kid with spinning the records on and pretending you were on the radio?
Yeah, it's sad but true.
More people say that in this industry that's how they started. Practicing and playing in their bedrooms when they were growing up.
Mike, I was very much affected also by radio shows like, I can't remember, the Green Hornet and, some of those old-time radio programs.
Before my time.
Well, this was kind of a 1940s, I think they sort of faded out in the 50s, but they were very big
Fibber
in the 40s
McGee and Molly,
Yeah,
I do
stuff
remember
like
that.
But so you connected that early childhood experience of playing records and then acting on the vision.
Well, I went on to be a DJ at a lot of radio stations across the country.
Yeah.
And it was finally in Bakersfield, when I was working at Caffey down there, the big powerhouse station, that I made the switch into television. Had to cut my hair because I had long hair, had to put on a suit for the first time, and it was quite a transition. I had already moved from being a DJ to doing news on the radio. So I went from doing news on the radio to doing news on the TV stations down there. And then one day, a friend of mine working up here in Fresno, Larry Rice, called me from Channel 47 and said, "We have a weekend opening up here. Are you interested?" And I said, "Sure." Came up and auditioned, and a week later I was up here starting my 30 years on television in Fresno.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned your hairstyle because we're actually we have a clip from your farewell, and there's quite a variety of hairstyles in there. So we'll just, we'll take a second and have a look at that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Scott.
And I'm Mike Scott.
Mike Scott. This is Mike Scott.
I'm Mike Scott. You don't go eating anything from strangers, okay?
Ceiling tiles also came down. They're scattered all across the floor.
This is where the chapter ends. A new one now begins. Time has come for letting go. The hardest part is when you know all of these years when we were here are ending. But I'll always remember we have had the time of our lives. And now the pages turn. The stories
Mike's going to relive those days.
700 miles an hour sitting in the cockpit of a $36 million airplane.
And I will not forget the faces left behind. It's hard to walk away from the best.
All right, well, it sounds like it was it easy to get in? You as a female, how was it to get into broadcasting at that time?
I was fortunate in that my predecessors were the ones who had to kind of clear that path. If you think about the Karen Humphrey and Nancy Osborne in Fresno, they started a few years earlier, and they really did have to kind of clear a path for everybody else as women in the industry. For me, I think that the newsrooms were about 40-60, so about 40% women, 60% men when I came in. And I don't think being a woman was an issue in trying to get the job. It was an issue in trying to do some of the stories because I was told many times by this particular news director who brought me in that stories were too dangerous for me to do. So that was Ken Coy. That was the only news director who ever told me anything like that. After that, I would say that most news directors really didn't consider if a story was dangerous or not. It was just this particular one.
And little did they know that you would be kicking and screaming with a herd of women in a triathlon years later.
Right, that
so
too, or
they gotta
jumping
take 'em
out of
on.
an airplane, or exactly. Yeah.
And how about you guys? Were there particular barriers? Maybe it was your youth to getting into that broadcasting arena?
No, by the time I got into television, I was already late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
So I had many years of experience in radio under my belt.
Yeah.
Everybody says you have a voice for radio. Well, you work on the radio long enough, you develop that voice.
All right, well, so let's talk about, you had all long, healthy careers in the business. What's a joyride? What's just some of the stellar moments for you?
Mike?
Probably the biggest highlight for me was when I got to fly with the Blue Angels.
I saw that.
Why don't they have the air show at Lemoore anymore? Do you know?
I don't know.
They used to have an air show at Lemoore every year, and the Blue Angels would come and
Yes.
perform, and every year one or two members of the local media were invited to fly with them.
Mike, I think it's because you flew with the Blue Angels.
That was the end of
I
it.
think that was the end of it.
But now it's different, but back then you had to go through 3 days of intense training to fly with them, and what an experience. We filmed the whole thing, they loaded me up with all the gear, threw me in the pool at Lemoore, and I sank to the bottom and had to swim for my life to
Oh,
try to
boy.
get, in case we had to eject in
Yeah.
the ocean, and put me in the ejector chair. And when we actually flew, I pulled 7.6 Gs,
Oh, my
almost 8
gosh.
times my body weight.
Did you get to see your face on any kind of
yeah.
camera?
Oh, yeah.
And but flying a $40 million airplane is a pretty incredible
Oh, my
experience.
gosh.
And how many jobs are there out there where you get to do things like that?
Absolutely.
And
did.
along those same lines, Dirk, a cameraman I worked with for many years at Channel 47, he and I got to go to Hong Kong with the Navy and spend a week on an aircraft carrier interviewing some of the pilots from Lemoore who were on their way back from the Persian Gulf back to the United States.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, how many jobs do you get to do those kind of incredible
exactly
things?
right.
But how about for you?
Well, I was just going to say, just to continue what Mike was saying, it's not so much a specific story that stands out in my mind, but the whole body of different experiences that I've gotten to have over the years in so many places around the country and around the world, and meeting so many different people who normally I don't think I would have met in a normal walk of life, at least not all of them collectively together. But there's really no one story that stands out. It's just the experience of being able to go out and cover all of these different stories for such a long period of time. It's been a very interesting career.
I think it must give you a unique sense of history and a great perspective that many people don't.
Well, it does, and you mentioned history. My degree is in history from Colorado State, and I didn't realize at the time how helpful and how valuable that history degree would be in trying to understand the current events that I covered for the next 40 or 50 years in my career. But I would recommend for anybody viewing, naturally you're going to want to get a college education and a liberal arts education, specializing though in journalism or mass communications or English or literature or history, if you contemplate any kind of career in journalism. History is very helpful.
So that's actually a good segue here to take this to Faith, because I think we probably came from a generation for the most part where education was perhaps a little more solid than it is today. I mean, that's my perspective. I might have a jaded view of things, but do you find, Faith, that what are the students like that are coming into the journalism department for you? What's the broadcasting arena hold for those folks?
Well, it's changed. It's changed quite a bit, because when Mike and Bud and I were getting into the business, it was an entirely different business. We had 4 networks, and I don't. Did they even have TV? No, I'm just kidding.
I barely had radio.
But there were only 4 networks, right? So in Fresno, for instance, if you had 3 networks,
3,
ABC,
yeah.
CBS,
Fox wasn't
and
around
NBC,
yet.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
it. That was it.
There would be an independent station, but it wasn't Fox. And I came from the Bay Area where there was Channel 2, so I think about it that way, which was independent. But there was a lot of money that was coming into these stations through advertising. So the stations were doing really well, and they could afford to hire big staffs, and they could afford to spend money on covering stories and on equipment, and you know, it was the heyday. Now, what students are finding is that there are a lot of jobs out there because people like us have left the jobs.
Okay.
And they're hiring these students straight out of college in a lot of markets as what we call MMJs, for a multimedia journalist or a one-person band. In other words, when we went out on stories, we went out with a photographer. Sometimes we went out with a field producer, or even a sound or a light man, and a woman. And we had a crew of people who were helping us. And we came back to the station, and we wrote our story, and then somebody edited it for us. And then there was somebody else who did graphics for that story. Well, now these students are getting that job, and they are doing it all. They're planning the stories, they're going out, they're shooting it, they're editing it, they are coming back, they're doing the graphics for it, and they're putting it all together. And they're tweeting and Facebooking and Instagramming and Snapchatting and everything else at the same time. It's the epitome of multitasking, which is something that people from our generation have a difficult time doing. Some of them are successful at it, but they have a difficult time doing it. And then to add to that, the salaries are low. So you have to really love the business. You have to really be passionate about the business if you're going to want to pursue this job. But they will still have the same experience that Mike, Bud, and I have had, and that is having that front seat or the front row to life, right? Being able to have the opportunity to ask questions and to just find out these things that we're curious about, and that's really the best part of it. And they still have those same opportunities.
So it sounds you kind of lead with passion in this business
Absolutely.
that you all came from. Huh?
You know, Faith's a little bit more positive than I am. I mean, the local stations anymore, when's the last time you heard of a local station sending someone to Hong Kong or halfway around the world to cover a story? Nowadays, the budgets are much tighter, and they just don't do those kind of stories anymore.
Yeah, and going back to what I started with is that advertising money is not coming in the way it used to, and it's split, you know, exponentially by so many different sources.
Can I follow up on that real quickly? When I started at 47, I was doing the weekend news. Our weekend news, 40% of the people watching TV at that time were watching our weekend news. Now, You're lucky if you get 1% of the
That's
people
right.
watching
Oh my gosh.
watching local news. That's how big it. But again, there were only 3 stations back then. Your choices were very limited.
Right.
Now, with 500 stations on cable and satellite and the internet options, it's very hard for local stations to make the money that they made for so many years.
We're talking, though, still about just the method of transmitting storytelling. There's always going to be a need for storytellers, journalists, people to tell what the news is or what the story is or what the feature story is. It's just that the platform is evolving to someplace else. And you're right, I mean, viewers are abandoning traditional television, appointment television, news at 6, in droves, but where are they going? They're going to the internet and other places, portable platforms, but the stories or the need for stories to be on those platforms remains the same. And so the industry will always need journalists and storytellers and writers, and so it's not as grim as it might
Right.
seem. It's just that people are going elsewhere to new venues to get their news.
So you certainly have to be adaptable, and I'm sure you experienced that over your years, and maybe even more so now, the advent of social media and so forth. It sounds like it's part and parcel of the job. So let me ask you, would you, and I know you have the opportunity to work with young people every day, would you still encourage people to follow into this industry with what you know? Maybe there's some
I do
caveats.
still encourage them, but with eyes wide open. And I think that they do go in with eyes wide open, and they do come back and they tell me, I am so glad I'm doing this. I hear from my students, and they're all over the country, that they are so thankful that they are doing this job. So no matter how grim we think the outlook may be, and we may be jaded or cynical, they are where we were 30 or 40 years ago, and they have their whole lives in front of them.
That's exciting.
Well, the difference, though, is when I started at 47, I had many years in radio of experience and many years in Bakersfield TV before I started at 47. Nowadays, the kids they're hiring, as you said, they're straight out of school, and they just don't come in with that experience. And it's not everyone is a storyteller. It's an art to be able to tell a story in a minute and a half or 2 minutes, whatever they are generous enough to give you. And that's where I think that local television news is suffering right now, is just in the quality of what's being presented.
So how can, briefly, because I want to take you someplace else here, how can kids, young people, overcome that? How can they develop those chops quickly? I mean, is it all about going to mass communication and journalism studies, or are there other things they can do to evolve?
You know, and I know that Mike and Bud probably have good answers for this too. It's a skill that you can develop. Anybody can develop the skill, but you really have to want it. It's that passion that we mentioned earlier. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much schooling you go through or what school you go through, you're not going to be able to do it.
You got to seek that out. Well, speaking of seeking things out, I'd like to shift gears here a little bit and see how you've leveraged or parlayed that history into what you do today or what you may see for the future. I know that some of you do public presentations. You're on camera still a lot, Mike. So how does that experience parlay into other arenas for you today and maybe for your students that are coming behind? What does the future look like?
I came here from doing my show on Central Valley Talk today. You know, I do it 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I write for Central California Life magazine. I'm doing some internet work for some local companies here in town, but it's all things I pick and choose to do now.
That's great.
As opposed to having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning 5 days a week,
Thank goodness.
driving through the fog to tell other people to stay home because the schools are closed. But I'm sorry, where were we going with that?
Well, no, and you answered my question.
Okay.
Do your communication skills change? Does what you do in radio and TV lend itself to what you do today, or have you had to shift in your
You
presentation
know where it
style?
helps me? I travel a lot. I travel the world a lot. And just being able to communicate with people and not being afraid of trying new things. Some of the places, I went to Egypt last year, and people were like, weren't you terrified? Look what's going on. I had the best time there, and it was on my bucket list to see the pyramids and the Valley of the Kings. I had an incredible experience, and there were almost no Americans traveling in Egypt at that time. And the Egyptian people I ran into were so appreciative of, thank you for coming, because so many other Americans are afraid to come here. And I'm not unaware of what's going on
Sure.
over there, believe me. But it didn't stop me from going and having a life-changing experience. And no matter how many pictures of the pyramids you've seen, until you've seen them in person, it's not
Yeah,
the
really.
same. Yeah.
Excellent.
One thing Mike had mentioned, I think all three of us write for Central Valley Life magazine.
Ah.
And to kind of continue the question you asked.
You were on the cover last
How,
week.
I know. Well, I got lucky and got the drought story, and so I spent several months working on the drought story, and it appeared last issue, and has been very well received because we're in the middle of a drought. But
Right.
the point is, I've been able to parlay my passion and my experience telling stories, and take it from the broadcast arena to the print arena. But the same skills apply. And so luckily I get to continue what I've been doing, throughout my whole career, just tell stories in a little different form, and I'm very thankful for that. And it's also an opportunity to go a little longer form. In TV, we're restricted to stories that are a minute 30, a minute
Yeah.
45 at the most. Well, you really can't do justice to any story in that amount of time. But in print, you can go 3 or 4 thousand
right.
words.
And you should ask Bud what the next story that's coming out in the next issue is about.
I don't know if we want to spill the beans yet, but it's about a local sports figure who is going to soon be on the national arena. Some people are aware of this person's prominence, but I don't think the audience at large is yet, and so we hope to introduce him to a fairly large audience in the edition that's coming out the 1st of April.
Yeah, and this is
Okay.
Central California Life, so you'll be able to see
Maybe
articles
our
from all
next
three
show
of
we'll
us.
be able to hold up the cover
That would be
and
fantastic,
or
yeah.
send them
We're trying to-
electronically
We're
to
trying
the
to get
show.
there first.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, yeah, I would say I have the same experience where I've been able to parlay what I've learned in the media industry into my students now, and see the work that they're doing, which airs on CMAC.TV and on Comcast, which is the same place where this program airs. And they put together a half-hour public affairs, news and public affairs show every week. But one of the things that they were able to do this semester, which has been very exciting for all of us, is that they joined the Global News Relay, where they worked with 11 other universities in the country, and they produced 15 minutes of news on poverty. So this aired about a month ago, and they put together this incredible show, and we're really proud of it. And what I've learned in the industry, part of that was what went into this. So yeah, we are all able to use those same skills.
That's excellent. And you demonstrated those skills so aptly today. You're all great communicators.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us. I know you all have busy lives still, post all the broadcasting stuff, and you're about ready to,
We haven't faded away.
you haven't faded away, and you're ready to fade into the sunset here tomorrow, are you
I
not?
take off tomorrow for Europe, yeah.
Okay, good.
Have a good trip.
And we'll have to, by the way, I'm taking the liberty, I think with your permission, to have your social media information here for folks so that they can follow you or tweet you or lurk you or however they want to keep track of your activities. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And to our audience, thank you very much. I just encourage you to stay always evolving your communication skills. Find out whatever tools you can. There's Toastmasters. There's all kinds of arenas where you can develop your skills and gain confidence, broadcasting, writing. There's so many avenues of communication. You can come join us here at CMAC to learn more about getting your message on air. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, folks, thank you very much.